All right, so we have made hasty shelter, friction fire, boiled water, made a saw, done a whole bunch of stuff. Once you have got all of your basic necessities taken care of, like fire, water, and shelter, then it's time to move on to food. Now there's a ton of different ways that you can grab food, but one of my favorite is a snare. Now before I tell you how to make a snare, don't go throwing these up and leaving them permanently anywhere. They will snag any animal that's the size of the animal you're looking for. And don't use them unless you check your local state and federal laws. There's tons of things that you can snare legally. There are ways that you can make your snare focus on the species size, so that like if a deer steps in your squirrel pole, it's not an issue because the deer can pull it free. And some of the ways that you do that is the diameter of the snare, whether or not the snare is steel versus brass. There's a lot of different ways that you can go and deal with that, and that's a little bit deeper than I want to go right at the moment. Now, this right here is tripwire. It's like Vietnam era tripwire. There's the yellow wire for, you know, grass, and then the green wire for the green stuff. And I'm gonna grab this one. I can get this to pop loose. I like this stuff because it's cheap. You can get it at an Army Navy surplus store. Really the best thing to use is actual snare wire that's dedicated for the purpose of catching the animal that you're looking for. So let's first off talk about that. There's gonna be squirrel-sized snares, there's gonna be rabbit-sized snares, badger-sized snares, and even deer-sized snares. Now, I don't know anywhere that it's legal to snare a deer, but that skill set is still important from a survival situation. So let's start out with rabbits. Rabbits, here at least, you can legally snare. You can snare jackrabbits. There's certain species and certain times that you can snare. Now, if we start with the smallest rabbit or the smallest animal, it's going to be like a squirrel or a mouse or something. If you grab a length that's about the length of your shoulder to the end of your arm, that's all that you really need, because what you're going to do is you're going to attach this to something like a log or whatever that you're going to use. I don't know anyone that's just going to grab snare wire and break it with their hands. And you can sit here all day long and go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Or you can just tie a simple loop knot, and all I'm doing is tying a simple loop. And then once you've got that simple loop, if you just pull this apart quickly, it will create friction in here and break it. So if I yank on it quick, it breaks that string in half. Now that's a simple little technique that you can use to break your string if you don't have some Leatherman tool or something else. Now once I've got my snare wire, if all I'm looking to do is to snare a rabbit, a squirrel, something small, all I really need is a simple loop. That simple loop followed by this going through that simple loop is all that you really need for a squirrel. If this log was a squirrel pole and I attached it like that, that's all that I need. When that squirrel goes through, it grabs him and it holds him and he'll fall off and no grip onto him. The good thing about snare wire is that it pinches and locks for the most part. You can build a lock into it, which I'll show you in a minute. And it holds, and it's not like something that the animal can bite through and pop off and go away with. So it's also a really quick death. It's about 30 seconds from the timing that I've seen studies done up in Canada till the squirrel is dead. So that's all that you need for a squirrel snare. Everybody gets super technical, but just a simple loop and you're good. Now, if you want to get something larger than a squirrel, this will be my squirrel snare. Let me just set this up and I'll use this on the squirrel pole in a minute. I just did a simple overhand knot with a little bit of line hanging out, and then I run this through it. And then I'll tie it to, this isn't a good squirrel pole, but it's a good demonstration pole. So take that and just twist it around a couple times. And then you can bend it to wherever you want it to be. And I can, if the loop's too big, I can slide it down further, which is fine, because if the squirrel comes through and even grabs it there, they get snagged, they fall off, it dangles and holds them. So there's your squirrel snare. If I want to get something a little bit bigger, like I don't know, mid-sized rabbits, or even really big, like a badger or whatever, I'm going to take this length of wire and I'm going to double it. And then I'm going to break it like we did earlier. So if you can see, I just tied a little slip knot. And to make this knot breaking technique work, once you tie your slip knot, you have to make it kind of tight and then give it a good yank, and that's how you break it out. Tend my spool so I don't have to deal with the mess. Now, this is a more robust snare that I'm about to make, that in some places it's legal, in some places it's not. You need to check your local laws and adhere to that. So make sure that what you're doing is legal. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my two ends, and the reason why I have double strand of this is because I want something that's really strong and that can handle a larger animal. If there's a mid-sized animal that gets in this weak wire and bends it even a little bit, it's going to break. So if I take this here and I twist it a couple of times, and all I've done is twist the end, and then I lay it down, that's going to hold it. Now, this is the ugly end, essentially. And I've got this two layers of wire. I want to twist it, which is going to take a minute. And it's just going to double strand this wire so that I've got a locking side and a non-locking side. Kind of rotating on me a little bit here. Okay, once I've twisted this into a double strand wire, I got my ugly side over here if I get my finger out of it. And then I've got my nice side. On my nice side, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this loop and I'm gonna create the lock. All that I do is spin it like a figure 8, drop it down. British friend of mine taught me this. Now, once I've got this lock, once this pulls tight, this figure 8 is gonna crank down against itself. So I take this ugly end here, put it through that figure 8, and then this is the end that I'm gonna tie to my anchor or whatever. For now, I'm just gonna stick it around this stick to show you how it works. So if I had a stick, maybe this is a game path right here. I created some choke points on the left side and the right side. I forced the animal to go through my game path, and I've set my little trap up right here. Now you want it about fist height off the ground for rabbits. And I would set my snare right about here. Now if you've got a sloppy snare that's wiggling all over the place, there's nothing wrong with taking a fork and breaking the end of it off and using that to hold your snare in place. It only takes one. If you really need to take two, you probably don't have enough brush creating the choke point. So when this thing goes through, you know, it goes hopping through and it grabs and it pulls tight. If you can get a close-up on that. As it pulls tight, that figure 8 right there locks down and pinches. Once you've got that locked down, it's really hard to get out. When an animal feels something grab it, it has a tendency to run. And when it runs, it just pulls it tighter and tighter and tighter. Now, I can even go so far as to having a snare log that I pick up and set over a game trail that I know the rabbits are gonna be in. Let me loosen this up. And then that way, I don't really disturb the environment very much. So if I've got a game trail where there's a lot of green turds, this is actually not a turd, this is a turd, then I know the rabbit's gonna come back to re-eat those turds, and I can take my log and stick it right over that game trail, set it up nicely, and then walk away, and I haven't substantially disturbed the environment. And then even if this log is not in the ground, that rabbit's not pulling that thing through the brush. If it does, it's only gonna be a few feet until it snags, and then it's gonna lock up. So this is one of the more effective locking ones that I've seen. Some people like it, some people don't. It's up to you. Okay, the last thing that we're going to do is a snare pull. So let me grab a pole and we'll be right back.